physiology and biology. Psychology is derived from used introspection to determine underlying structures of the brain. Structuralism. The act of looking into one's own thoughts and feelings. Introspection. Need to analyze the purpose of behavior. Functionalism. Unconscious childhood. Psychoanalytic dynamic. Learned, reinforced. Behavioral. Free will, choice, ideal, actualization. Humanistic. Perceptions, thoughts. Cognitive. Genes. Evolutionary. Brain, entities. Biological. Society. Sociocultural. Combo of all approaches. Biopsychosocial. First female president of the APA. Mary Calkins. Natural selection and evolution. Charles Darwin. Reformed mental institutions in U.S. Dorothy Dix. First APA president, first journal. G. Stanley Hall. Father of American psychology, functionalist. William James. Father of modern psychology, structuralist. Wilhelm Wundt. First woman to earn a PhD in psychology. Margaret Floy Washburn. First female in psychology. Christine Ladd Franklin. Pure science that aims to increase the scientific knowledge base. Basic research. Purpose is to help people. Applied research. Research or counseling, MS or PhD. Psychologist. Prescribes medicine and diagnose MD. Psychiatrist. ADV researcher controls variables to establish cause and effect. DISADV difficult to generalize. Experiment. Variable that is manipulated. Independent variable. Measured variable. Dependent variable. The group in an experiment that receives the variable being tested. Experimental group. Show behaviors associated with the EXP group when having received placebo. Placebo effect. Experiment where neither the participant or the experimenter are aware of which condition people are assigned to. Double blind. Only participant blind used if experimenter can't be blind. Single blind. Clear, precise, typically quantifiable definition of your variables allows replication. Operational definition. Assigns participants to either control or experimental group at random, minimizes bias, increased chance of equal representation. Random assignment. Method for choosing participants minimizes bias. Random sample. Accurate results. Validity. Same results every time. Reliability. ADV real-world validity. DISADV no cause and effect. Naturalistic observation. ADV identify relationship between two variables. DISADV no cause or effect. Correlation. Variables increase and decrease together. Positive correlation. As one variable increases, the other decreases. Negative correlation. Different variable is responsible for relationship. Third variable problem. belief of correlation that doesn't exist. Illusory correlation. ADV, study of one individual in great detail. DISADV, no cause or effect. Case study. Shape of the data. Descriptive stats. Average. Mean. Middle number. Median. Most frequently occurring number. Mode. Establishes significance. Inferential statistics. Results not due to chance. Statistical significance. Confidentiality. Informed consent. Debriefing. Deception must be warranted. No harm. Ethical guidelines. Basic cell of the nervous system. Neuron. Receive incoming signals. Dendrites. Cell body. Soma. AP travels down this. Axon. Speeds up signal down axon. Protects axon. Myelin sheath. Release NTs. Send signal onto next neuron. Terminals. Sacs made of membrane inside terminal contain NTs. Vesicles. Gap between neurons. Synapse. Movement of sodium and potassium ions across a membrane sends an electrical charge down the axon. Action potential. Stimulus must trigger the AP past its threshold but does not increase the intensity of the response. All or none law. Neuron must rest and reset before it can send another AP. Refractory period. Sensory neurons receive signals. Afferent neurons accept signals. Motor neurons send signals. Efferent neurons signal exits. SAME. Cells in spinal cord responsible for reflex loop. Interneurons. Brain and spinal cord. Central nervous system. Rest of the nervous system. Peripheral nervous system. Arouses the body for flight fight. Somatic nervous system. Established homeostasis after a sympathetic response. Parasympathetic nervous system. Chemicals released in synaptic gap received by neurons. Neurotransmitters. Major inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA. A major excitatory neurotransmitter involved in memory. Glutamate. Reward and movement. Dopamine. Moods and emotion. Serotonin. Memory. Acetylcholine. Sympathetic NS arousal. Epinephrine and norepinephrine. Pain control. Endorphins. Love and bonding. Oxytocin. Drug that mimics NT. Agonist. Drug that blocks NT. Antagonist. Unused NTs are taken back up into the sending neuron. SSRIs block reuptake. Treatment for depression. Reuptake. Oldest part of the brain. Hindbrain. Movement and balance. Cerebellum. Vital organs. Medulla. Sleep and arousal. PONZZZZ. Pons. Alertness. Reticular formation. Higher thought processes. Forebrain. Emotions. Fear. Amy is emotional. Smell. Amygdala. Memory. Remember if you saw a hippo on campus. Hippocampus. Reward pleasure center. Eating behaviors linked to endocrine system. Hypothalamus. Relay center for sensory info in the brain except for smell. They must deliver this message unless it's musty. Thalamus. Outer portion of the brain, higher order thought process. Cerebral cortex. Vision, back of the head. Occipital lobe. Decision making, problem solving, planning, personality. Frontal lobe. Hearing and face recognition located on the sides of head. Temporal lobe. Sensation, top of the head. Parietal lobe. Map of our sensory receptors in parietal lobe. Somatosensory cortex. An area at the rear of the frontal lobes that controls voluntary movements. Motor cortex. Speech production. Broca's area. Language comprehension. Wernicke and number 39's area. The bundle of nerve fibers connecting the two cerebral hemispheres. Corpus callosum. The brain has some specialized features. Language processed in L hemisphere. Lateralization. Done by Sperry and Gotsunoga. Images shown to the right hemisphere will be processed in the left. Patient can verbally identify what they saw. Split brain experiments. Ability to be molded, can heal itself. Plasticity. Monozygotic. Identical twins. Dizygotic. Fraternal twins. MZ twins will have a higher percentage of also developing a disease. Genetics, twin study. MZ twins raised in different environments show differences. Environment, twin study. Sense hormones throughout the body. Endocrine system. Controlled by hypothalamus, release growth hormones. Pituitary gland. Related to sympathetic NS, releases adrenaline. Adrenal glands. Brain activity not specific. EEG. Not useful, doesn't show tissues. X-ray. Shows structures. CT/MRI. Glucose shows brain activity real time. PET. Glucose shows activity real time. fMRI. Brain damage. Lesion. Detection of signal 50% of time. Absolute threshold. Two stimuli must differ by a constant minimum proportion. Difference threshold. Theory regarding how stimuli are detected under different conditions. Signal detection theory. Diminished sensitivity as a consequence of constant stimulation. Sensory adaptation. Tendency to see something as part of a group speeds up signal processing. Perceptual adaptation. Failure to notice something added BC, you're so focused on another task. Inattentional blindness. Failing to notice changes in the environment or scene. Change blindness. Notice your name across the room when it's spoken when you weren't previously paying attention. Cocktail party effect. Pathway of vision, light cornea, pupil, iris, lens, retina, rods, cones, bipolar cells, ganglion cells, optic nerve, optic chiasm, occipital lobe. Visual pathway. Protects the eye and bends light to provide focus. Cornea. controls the amount of light entering the eye. Pupil iris focuses light onto retina. Lens area of best vision. Fovea black-white dim light. Rods color vision bright light. Cones connect rods, cones, and ganglion cells. Bipolar cells. Opponent processing occurs here. Ganglion cells occurs where the optic nerve leaves the eye. Blind spot. Specialized neurons that see motion, shapes, lines, etc. located in occipital lobe. Feature detectors. 3 types of codes for receiving color. Trichromatic theory explains color blindness, missing a cone type. What does trichromatic theory explain? Complementary colors are processed in ganglion cells. Opponent process theory explains why we see an after image. What does the opponent process theory explain? Visual system overwhelms all others. Visual capture recognize that objects do not physically change despite changes in sensory input. Constancies. Adjacent lights blink on off in succession looks like movement. Phi phenomenon. Motion produced by rapid succession of slightly varying images. Stroboscopic movement. How we form a 3D image from a 2D image. Monocular cues. Overlapping images appear closer. Interposition. 2 objects that are usually similar in size, the smaller one is further away. Relative size. Hazy objects appear further away. Relative clarity. Coarser objects are closer. Texture gradient. Higher objects seen as more distant. Relative height. Parallel lines appear to converge with distance. Linear perspective. How both eyes make up a 3D image. Binocular cues. Image is cast slightly different on each retinal. Location of image helps us determine depth. Retinal disparity. Eyes strain more as objects draw nearer. Convergence. Whole to smaller parts. Top-down processing. Smaller parts to whole. Bottom-up processing. Pathway of sound. Sound greater than pinna greater than auditory canal greater than eardrum greater than hammer anvil stirrup greater than oval window greater than cochlea greater than auditory nerve greater than temporal lobes. Auditory system. Pinna auditory canal. Outer ear. Eardrum HAS. Middle ear. Cochlea sounds first processed here. Inner ear. Both occur in the cochlea. Theories of hearing. Location where hair cells bends determines sound. Place theory of hearing. Rate at which action potentials are sent determines sound. Frequency theory of hearing. Mechanoreceptors, spinal cord, thalamus, somatosensory cortex. Touch. Gate control theory. We have a gate to control how much pain is experienced. Pain. Sense of body position. Kinesthetic. Sense of balance. Vestibular. 5 taste receptors: bitter, salty, sweet, sour, umami. Taste. Only sense that does not route through the thalamus first goes to temporal lobe and amygdala. Smell. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Gestalt psychology. Organize information into figure objects that stand apart from surrounds. Figure ground. Mentally fill in gaps. Closure. Group things together that appear near each other. Proximity. Group things together based off of looks. Similarity. Tendency to mentally form a continuous line. Continuity. Controlled processes, totally aware. Higher level consciousness. Automatic processes, daydreaming, phone numbers. Lower level consciousness. Produced through drugs, fatigue, hypnosis. Altered state of consciousness. Sleeping and dreaming. Subconscious. Knocked out. No awareness of consciousness. Thinking about thinking. Metacognition. Awake and alert. Beta waves. High amp, drowsy NREM. Alpha waves. 1. Light sleep. 2. Burst of sleep. Spindle. 3. Delta waves, deep sleep. Alpha wave stages. Dreaming, cognitive processing. Rapid eye movement. 90 minutes. How long does the entire sleep cycle take? REM. It lasts longer throughout the night. What occurs between each cycle of sleep? 24-hour biological clock controls body temp and sleep controlled by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. Circadian rhythm. Inability to fall asleep. Insomnia. Not during REM. Sleepwalking talking. Extreme nightmares not in REM sleep typical in children. Night terrors. Fall asleep anywhere at any time. Narcolepsy. Stop breathing suddenly while asleep. Sleep apnea. Dreaming is gratification of unconscious desires and needs. Freud's unconscious wish fulfillment. The underlying meaning of a dream. Latent content. The remembered storyline of a dream. Manifest content. Brain produces random burst of energy stimulating lodged memories. Dreams start random then develop meaning. Activation synthesis. Reduces pain, helps you relax, cannot give you superhuman strength, make you regress, make you do things against your will. Hypnosis. Triggers dopamine release in the brain. Psychoactive drugs. Alcohol, barbiturates, tranquilizers, opiates, decrease sympathetic NS activation, highly addictive. Depressants. Amphetamines, cocaine, nicotine, caffeine, increase sympathetic NS activation, highly addictive. Stimulants. LSD, marijuana, causes hallucinations, not very addictive. Hallucinogens. Needing more of a drug to achieve the same effects. Tolerance. Becoming addicted to the drug must have it to avoid withdrawal symptoms. Dependence. Psychological and physiological symptoms associated with sudden stoppage. Unpleasant can kill you. Withdrawal. Brings about response without needing to be learned. Unconditioned stimulus. Response that occurs naturally without training. Unconditioned response. Stimulus that normally doesn't evoke a response. Neutral response. Once neutral stimulus that now brings about a response. Conditioned stimulus. Response that after conditioning follows a CS. Conditioned response. Timing of the pairing NSCS must be presented immediately before the US. Contiguity. Process of learning the response pairing. Acquisition. Previously conditioned response dies out over time. Extinction. The tendency of a learned behavior to recover from extinction after a rest period. Spontaneous recovery. CR2-like stimuli similar sounding bell. Generalization. CR2 only the CS. Discrimination. Classical conditioning involves cognitive processes. Contingency model, Rescorla and Wagner. Innate dispositions can allow classical conditioning to occur in one trial. Conditioned taste aversion. Conditioned of fear in a baby. Counter-conditioning, John Watson. B.F. Skinner. Who did operant conditioning? Behavior followed by plus outcomes are strengthened. Neg outcomes weaken a behavior. Cat in a puzzle box. Law of effect. Add something nice to increase a behavior. Positive reinforcement. Take away something bad to increase a behavior. Negative reinforcement. Add something bad to decrease behavior. Positive punishment. Take away something good to decrease a behavior. Negative punishment. Innately satisfying desirable may be biologically driven. Primary reinforcer. Everything else. Secondary reinforcer. Tangible secondary reinforcer that can be exchanged. Token reinforcer. Respond to similar stimulus for reward. Generalization. Stimulus signals when behavior will or will not be reinforced. Discrimination. Same as classical conditioning. Extinction spontaneous recovery. Reinforcing behaviors that are intrinsically motivating causes you to stop doing them. Overjustification effect. Use successive approximations to train behavior. Shaping. Receive reward for every response. Continuous reinforcement schedule. Reward every X number of response. Fixed ratio schedule. Reward every X amount of time passed. Fixed interval schedule. Rewarded after a random number of responses. Variable ratio schedule. Rewarded after a random amount of time has passed. Variable interval schedule. The process of observing and imitating a specific behavior. Modeling behavior. Helping behaviors. Prosocial behavior. Mean behaviors. Antisocial behavior. Learning is hidden until useful. Latent learning. Mental representation of an area allows navigation if blocked. Cognitive maps. Some learning is through simple intuition. Insight learning. No matter what you do, you never get a positive outcome, so you just give up. Learned helplessness. The processing of information so that it can be stored. Encoding. Requires no effort. Automatic encoding. Requires attention and conscious effort. Effortful encoding. Attaching images to information makes it easier to remember. Imagery. We better remember what we're interested in. Self-referent encoding. Combining different types of encoding aids in memory. Dual encoding. Organizing items into familiar, manageable units. Chunking. Shortcuts to help us remember info easier. Mnemonics. Using letters to remember something. Acronym. Using locations to remember a list of items in order. Method for loci. Where you learn the info, you best remember the info. Context-dependent memory. The physical state you are in when learning is the way you should be when testing low PLS don't do. State-dependent memory. The retention of encoded information over time. Storage. Sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. Information processing model. Stores all incoming stimuli that you receive first. You have to pay attention. Sensory memory. Visual sensory memory lasts 0.3 seconds. Iconic memory. Auditory sensory memory lasts 2 to 3 seconds. Echoic memory. Info passes from sensory memory to STM, lasts 30 seconds and can remember 7 items. Short-term memory. Conscious repetition of information resets the clock. Rehearsal. Splits STM into 2, visual spatial memory and phonological loop. A central executive puts it together before passing it to LTM. Working memory model. The relatively permanent storage of information. Long-term memory. Conscious recollection. Explicit memory. A category of long-term memory that involves the recollection of specific events, situations, and experiences. Episodic memory. A network of associated facts and concepts that make up a general knowledge of the world. Semantic memory. Unconscious recollection. Implicit memory. Info that is seen earlier primes you to remember something later on. Priming. Skills and habits. Procedural memory. Memory is stored according to a hierarchy. Hierarchies. Linked memories are stored together. Semantic networks. Pre-existing mental concept of how something should look. Schemas. In the hippocampus for most memory. Acetylcholine neurons. Procedural memories. What is the cerebellum for with memory? Neural bases of memory connections are strengthened over time with repeated stimulation. Long-term potentiation. The process of getting info out of memory storage. Retrieval. Our tendency to recall best the last and first items in a list. Serial position effect. Remember what you've been told with OQs. Recall. Remember what you've been told W/Qs. Recognition. A clear memory of an emotionally significant moment or event. Flashbulb memory. Unconsciously buried memories are unreliable. Repressed memories. Forgot info because you never encoded it in the first place. Encoding failure. The more closely retrieval cues match the way we learn the info, the better we remember the info. Encoding specificity principle. Recall decreases rapidly at first, then reaches a plateau after which little more is forgotten. Forgetting curve. Old information interferes with the new. Proactive interference. New information interferes with old. Retroactive interference. The distortion of memory by suggestion or misinformation. Misinformation effect. An inability to form new memories. Anterograde amnesia. An inability to retrieve information from one's past. Retrograde amnesia. Caused by destruction of acetylcholine in hippocampus. Alzheimer and number 39's disease. Smallest unit of sound. Phonemes. Smallest unit of meaning. Morpheme. Rules in a language that enable us to communicate. Grammar. Set of rules by which we derive meaning. Semantics. Rules for combining words into sentences. Syntax. Infants babble first stage of speech. Babbling stage. The stage in which children speak mainly in single words. One-word stage. Before the second year, a child starts to speak in two-word sentences. Two-word stage. Kids repeat what they hear, can't do it perfectly. Imitation. Grammar mistake where kids overuse certain morphemes. Overregularization. Reinforced for language use. Operant conditioning. Chomsky says that language is innate and we are predisposed to learn it. Inborn universal grammar. Period of time where something must be learned or else it can never happen. Critical period for language. Language influences the way we think, developed by Worf. Linguistic determinism. Mental categories that are used to group objects, events, and characteristics. Concepts. All instances of a concept are compared to an ideal example. Prototype. A step-by-step procedure for solving a problem. Algorithm. Shortcut strategy. Heuristic. Make inferences based on your experience. Assume someone must be a librarian, be see they're quiet. Representativeness heuristic. Relying on availability to judge the frequency of something. Availability heuristic. Keep using one strategy, cannot think outside of the box. Functional fixedness. Tendency of one's pre-existing beliefs to distort logical reasoning by making invalid conclusions. Belief bias. Clinging to one's initial conceptions after the basis on which they were formed has been discredited. Belief perseverance. Look for evidence to support what we already believe. Confirmation bias. Data-driven decisions general to specific. Inductive reasoning. Driven by logic specific to general. Deductive reasoning. Expands the number of possible problem solutions. Divergent thinking. Complex behaviors have fixed patterns and are not learned. Instinct. Physiological need creates aroused tension that motivates you to satisfy the need. Drive reduction. Unlearned drive based on survival. Primary drive. Learned drive. Secondary drive. Human motivation aims to seek optimum levels of arousal, not to eliminate it. Optimum arousal. Maslow's theory of the most important motivations people have ranks priority from low to high. Hierarchy of needs. A desire to perform a behavior effectively for its own sake. Intrinsic motivation. A desire to perform a behavior due to promised rewards or threats of punishment. Extrinsic motivation. Level is maintained by the pancreas. Glucose. Decreases glucose. Too little glucose makes us hungry. Insulin. Released by the hypothalamus, telling us to eat. Orexin. Stomach contractions, glucose, insulin, orexin, ghrelin, obestidin in PPY. What tells us we are hungry? When simulated makes you hungry, when lesioned you will never eat again. Lateral hypothalamus. When stimulated makes you feel full, when destroyed you constantly eat. Ventromedial hypothalamus. Signals the brain to reduce appetite. Leptin. Increased rate of heart attack, hypertension, atherosclerosis, diabetes can be genetic. Adopted children resemble their biological parents. Obesity. There is a control system that dictates how much fat you should carry. Every person is different. Set point. Lack of appetite, loss of 15% body fat, distorted body issues. Anorexia. Perfectionism, need for control, disapproving parents who set high achievement standards. Causes of anorexia and bulimia. An eating disorder characterized by episodes of overeating, usually of high-calorie foods, followed by vomiting, laxative use, fasting, or excessive exercise. Bulimia. Stimulation increases sexual behavior, destruction leads to sexual inhibition. Hypothalamus. Monitors, initiates and restricts hormones, males testosterone, females estrogen. Pituitary gland. Excitement, plateau, orgasm, resolution, male refractory period. Sexual response pattern. First researcher to conduct studies in sex suggested that people were very promiscuous. Studies lacked a representative sample, created scale of homosexuality. Alfred Kinsey. Biological roots, differences in the brain, identical twins more likely to be gay, later sons more likely to be. Homosexuality. Stimulus, physiological response, emotion. James Lang theory. Stimulus, emotion and physical condition. Cannon-Bard theory. Adds cognitive labeling, stimulus, arousal, interpret external cues, label emotion. Schachter's two-factor theory. 6 universal emotions seen all across cultures. Behavioral factors of emotion. Gestures, Duchenne smile. Non-verbal cues. Being forced to smile will make you happy. Facial feedback hypothesis. Seale's concept that the body responds to stress with alarm, resistance and exhaustion. General adaptation syndrome. Body you freak out in response to stress. Alarm. Body you are dealing with stress. Resistance. Body you cannot take anymore. Stress is depleting, most vulnerable to being sick. Exhaustion. Rigid, stressful person, perfectionist, at risk for heart disease. Type A personality. Laid back and relaxed. Type B personality. Psychological study of people at work focuses on employee recruitment, placement, training, satisfaction, productivity. Industrial organizational psychology. Intersection of engineering and psych focuses on safety and efficiency of human-machine interactions. Ergonomics human factors. Productivity increases when workers are made to feel important. Hawthorne effect. Manager controls employees, enforces rules, good for lower-level jobs. Theory X management. Manager gives employees responsibility, looks for input, good for high-level jobs. Theory Y management. Emotional attachment. Effective employee commitment. Stay due to costs of leaving. Continuance employee commitment. Stay due to obligation. Normative employee commitment. No training, just do it for no happiness. Job. Work for advancement, some happiness. Career. Work because you love it, lots of happiness. Calling. 0 to 14 days, cells are dividing. Zygote. Until about 9 weeks, vital organs being formed. Embryo. 9 weeks to birth, overall development. Fetus. Agents that damage the process of development, such as drugs and viruses. Teratogens. Physical and cognitive abnormalities in children caused by a pregnant woman's heavy drinking. In severe cases, symptoms include noticeable facial misproportions. Fetal alcohol syndrome. Natural course of development occurs no matter what. Maturation. Innate responses we are born with. Reflexes. After continual exposure you pay less attention used to test babies. Habituation. Babies have to learn depth perception so they will cross a cliff. Visual cliff. Concepts or framework that organize information. Schemas. Incorporate new info into existing schemas. Assimilation. Adjust existing schemas to incorporate new info. Accommodation. Birth to 2 years, focused on exploring the world around them, like object permanence and development of sense of self. Sensory motor stage. The awareness that things continue to exist even when not perceived. Object permanence. By 2 years can recognize themselves in the mirror. Sense of self. 2 to 7 years, children use symbolism to represent various aspects of their environment, lack conservation and reversibility but are egocentric. Pre-operational stage. Properties such as mass, volume, and number remain the same despite changes in the forms of objects. Conservation. The capacity to think through a series of steps and then mentally reverse direction, returning to the starting point. Reversibility. Inability to distinguish one's own perspective from another's. Think everyone sees what they see. Egocentric. Use operational thinking, classification, and can think logical in concrete text. Concrete operational stage. 11 to 15 years, use abstract and idealist thoughts, hypothetical deductive reasoning. Formal operational stage. Stages to discrete dev differs BW kids. Problems with Piaget's theory. Cognitive development is a social process to need to interact with others. Vygotsky's theory. The gap between what a child can do alone and what a child can do with assistance. Zone of proximal development. Patterns of arousal and emotional reactions and babies. Temperament. Baby geese believe the first thing they see after hatching is their mother happens during critical period. Imprinting. Discovered that contact comfort is more important than feeding. Monkeys raised in isolation couldn't socialize. Harry Harlow. Developed a strange situation. Mary Ainsworth. Upset when mom leaves, but happy when returns. Secure attachment. Actively avoids mom, doesn't care if mom leaves. Avoidant attachment. Very anxious before mother leaves, very upset at departure, see contact at arrival but also show resistance. Ambivalent attachment. Confused, fearful, dazed, result of abuse. Disorganized attachment. Parenting styles. Boomerang. Rules and obedience, my way or the highway. Kids lack initiative in college. Authoritarian. Parents submit to their children's desires. They make few demands and use little punishment. Permissive. Give and take with kids. Kids become socially competent and reliable. Authoritative. Studied moral development, 3 stages. Kohlberg. Before age 9, children show morality to avoid punishment or gain reward. Pre-conventional morality. Adolescents uphold laws and rules to gain social approval or maintain social order. Conventional morality. Adults, they do what they believe is right. Post-conventional morality. Said moral reasoning and moral behaviors are 2 different things. Carol Gilligan. 8 stages. Each stage represents a crisis that must be resolved, results in competence or weakness. Erickson, socio-emotional development. Birth 18 months. If needs are dependably met, infants develop basic trust. Trust versus mistrust. Toddlers learn to exercise their will and do things for themselves, or they doubt their abilities. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. 3 to 6 learn to take initiative, task and carry out plans. Initiative versus guilt. Children learn the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks or they feel inferior. Industry versus inferiority. Refine a sense of self by testing roles and forming an identity. Identity versus role confusion. Form close relationships and gain capacity for love. Intimacy versus isolation. 40-60s discover a sense of contributing to the world through family and work. Generativity versus stagnation. Reflect on your life, feel satisfaction or failure. Integrity versus despair. Rapid skeletal and sexual maturation. Puberty. The body structures that make sexual reproduction possible. Primary sex characteristics. Non-reproductive sexual characteristics such as female breasts and hips, male voice quality, and body hair. Secondary sex characteristics. Sex equals chromosomes, gender equals what you identify yourself as. Gender development. Expectations about what is appropriate behavior for each sex. Gender roles. We learn social behavior by observing and imitating those around us. Social learning theory. Cells have a maximum of divisions before they can't divide anymore. Cellular clock theory of aging. Unstable oxygen molecules watt per inch cells damage DNA. Free radical theory of aging. A study in which people of different ages are compared with one another at the same point in time. Cross-sectional study. ADV, inexpensive and quick DISADV can be differences due to generational gap. Advantages and disadvantages of cross-sectional study. Research in which the same people are restudied and retested over a long period. Longitudinal study. ADV eliminates group differences, lots of detail. DISADV expensive, time-consuming, high dropout rates. Advantages and disadvantages of longitudinal study. Solving or doing something to alter the course of stress. Problem-focused coping. Reducing the emotional distress. Emotion-focused coping. Immediate awareness of current environment. Conscious. Available to awareness. Preconscious. Not within thought, not awake. Unconscious. Our hidden true animalistic wants and desires operates on the pleasure principle, all about rewards and avoiding pain. Id. Moral conscience. Superego. Reality principle has to deal with society stuck mediating between superego and id. Ego. Keeping distressing thoughts and feelings buried in the unconscious. Repression. Attribute personal shortcomings and faults onto others. Projection. The ego's protective methods of reducing anxiety by unconsciously distorting reality. Defense mechanisms. Refuses to acknowledge some aspect of objective reality. Denial. Shift feelings from an unacceptable object to a more acceptable one. Displacement. Switching unacceptable impulses into their opposites. Reaction formation. Transforms into an earlier development period in the face of stress. Regression. Replace a less acceptable reasoning with a more acceptable one. Rationalization. Replace unacceptable impulse with a socially acceptable one. Sublimation. 0 to 18 months pleasure centers on the mouth sucking, biting, chewing. Oral stage. Pleasure focuses on bowel and bladder elimination, coping with demands for control. Anal stage. Pleasure zone is the genitals, coping with incestuous sexual feelings. Phallic stage. Boys wanted to kill fathers to be with their mother. Young boys learn to identify with father out of fear of retribution, castration, anxiety. Oedipal complex. The unconscious desire of girls to replace their mother and win their father's love. Learn to identify with mom because they can't be with dad. Penis envy. Electra complex. 6. Puberty. Dormant sexual feelings. Personality is set. Latency stage. Maturation of sexual interests. Oedipal and Electra feelings are repressed. Genital stage. Can become stuck in an earlier stage. Influences personality. Fixation. Unverifiable, descriptive, not predictable. What's wrong with Freud's psychosexual stages? Analysis of mental and emotional state for treatment. Analyzes unconscious motives. Psychoanalysis. A method of exploring the unconscious in which the person relaxes and says whatever comes to mind, no matter how trivial or embarrassing. Free association. Looks for feelings to transfer to psychoanalyst. Transference. Analyze the manifest and latent content. Dream interpretation. Ambiguous stimuli shown to look at your unconscious motives. Projective test. a projective test in which people express their inner feelings and interests through the stories they make up about ambiguous scenes. Thematic apperception test. Neo-Freudian who created concept of collective and conscious. Carl Jung. Neo-Freudian offered feminist critique of Freud's theory, said personality develops in context of social relationships, not sexual urges. Karen Horney. Enduring personal qualities or attributes that influence behavior across situations. Traits. A statistical procedure that identifies similar components. Factor analysis. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Big Five personality traits. Imaginative, preference for variety, and independent. Openness. Organized, careful, disciplined. Conscientiousness. Sociable, fun-loving, affectionate. Extroversion. Soft-hearted, trusting, helpful. Agreeableness. Emotional stability, calm, secure. Neuroticism. Ignores the role of the situation in behavior. What's wrong with trait theory? Identifying traits gives us perspectives about careers, relationships, health. What's good with trait theory? Helpful for mental health and job placement. MMPI. Gave you 4-letter combo. Myers-Briggs. Their long, socially desirability can be an influence too broad. What's wrong with MMPI and Myers-Briggs test? The psychological view that assumes the existence of the self and emphasizes the importance of self-awareness and the freedom to make choices. Humanistic perspective. Talked about our self-concept. Self-concept is the center of your personality. Carl Rogers. What others see. Actual self. Who you want to be. Ideal self. Too optimistic about human nature, abstract concepts too difficult to test. What's wrong with humanistic perspective? Emphasizes conscious experiences and change. What's good about humanistic perspective? A culture in which people believe that their primary responsibility is to themselves. Individualistic culture. Give priority to the goals of the group. Your identity is part of that group. Collectivistic cultures. Views behavior as influenced by the interaction between people's traits and their social context. Social cognitive perspective. Complex interaction of inner process and environmental influences personality. Behavior. Reciprocal determinism and self-efficacy. Bobo-doll experiment. Albert Bandura. Interaction of behavior, cognitions and environment. Reciprocal determinism. Belief in one's personal ability to do a task. Self-efficacy. The perception that you control your own fate. Internal locus of control. Chance outside forces control your fate. External locus of control. Too specific, cannot generalize. What's wrong with social cognitive? Highlights situations and cognitive explanations of personality. What's good with social cognitive? Observations and interviews. How to test social cognitive. First to suggest intelligence was inherited. Intelligence based on muscle strength, size of head, reaction time, etc. Galton. two clusters of mental abilities: crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. Gestalt. Our reasoning and verbal skills, what you learn in school, tends to increase with age. Crystallized intelligence. Our ability to reason speedily and abstractly tends to decrease during late adulthood. Fluid intelligence. Said a general intelligence underlies all mental abilities. Spearman's G factor. Multiple intelligences: linguistic, logical, mathematical, musical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, intrapersonal, interpersonal, naturalist. Gardner. Analytical, creative, practical. Sternberg's triarchic theory. The ability to break problems down into component parts or analysis for problem solving. Analytical intelligence. The ability to deal with new and different concepts and to come up with new ways of solving problems. Creative intelligence. The ability to use information to get along in life and become successful. Practical intelligence. Developed first intelligence test combined with Terman developed the Stanford Binet IQ test. Binet. Mental age, chronological age x 100. IQ. Developed the Waze and Whisk most commonly used today. Wexler. IQs have increased steadily from one generation to the next due to education standards and better IQ test. Flynn effect. High IQ equals above 135, mentally retarded equals below 70. Extremes of intelligence. PKU, liver fails to produce an enzyme needed to break down chemicals, leads to brain damage. Down syndrome, extra copy of 21st chromosome. Fragile X, higher chance in boys due to 1X chromosome. Causes of mild retardation. Genetics, home environment, social class, generation. Influences on IQ. MZ twins have similar IQ, adopted kids more similar to biological parents. Genetics involving IQ. Early neglect leads to lower IQ, good schooling to higher IQ. Environment involving IQ. A test designed to predict a person's future performance. Aptitude test. A test that assesses what one has learned. Achievement test. Administering the test to a representative sample of future test takers in order to establish a basis for meaningful comparison. Standardization. Same results every time. Reliability. Test is accurate, measures what it is intended to. Valid. A measure of reliability in which a test is split into two parts and an individual scores on both halves are compared. Split half reliability. Using the same test on two occasions to measure consistency. Test-retest reliability. Test measures what you want it to. Content validity. Test is able to accurately predict a trait. Predicted validity. Measures how much the scores vary from the mean. Standard deviation. Normal distribution. What do standardization tests establish? Behavior that causes people to experience distress and prevents them from functioning in their daily lives. Abnormal behavior. Biology, psychological issues, supernatural issues. Historical causes of abnormal behavior. Emphasizes treatment of disorders as though they have a biological origin. Came through the reformation of institutions in the U.S. has caused an increase in stigmatization. Medical model of abnormal behavior. Currently used model: stress, biological, psychological, and social causes. Biopsychosocial model. Manual listing all currently accepted psychological disorders, classifies them based on criteria, provides no explanation of causes or treatments. DSM. An anxiety disorder in which a person is continually tense, apprehensive, and in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal. Generalized anxiety disorder. An anxiety disorder marked by unpredictable minutes-long episodes of intense dread in which a person experiences terror and accompanying chest pain, choking, or other frightening sensations. Panic disorder. Fear of open spaces. Agoraphobia. Irrational fears of specific objects or situations. Phobias. Repressed thoughts and feelings manifest in anxiety and rituals. Psychodynamic. Fear conditioning leads to anxiety which is then reinforced. Behavioralist. Natural selection favored those with certain phobias. Twins often share disorders, often see less GABA in the brain. Biological. An anxiety disorder characterized by unwanted repetitive thoughts and/or actions. OCD. A prolonged and severe stress reaction to a scary event X. War. PTSD. Psychological disorders with no apparent physical cause. Somatoform disorders. Loss of feeling or usage of a limb or body part, no psychological cause. Conversion disorder. A person interprets normal physical sensations as symptoms of a disease must disrupt their life. Illness anxiety disorder. Disorder occurring when a person seems to have two or more distinct personalities within one body. Dissociative identity disorders. Usually caused by traumatic childhood events. What is dissociative identity disorder caused by? Following a traumatic event, a person leaves, taking on a whole new life and personality with no memory of the previous one. Dissociative amnesia and fugue. A mood disorder in which a person feels sad and hopeless for weeks or months, apathy towards life. Major depressive disorder. A childhood disorder marked by severe recurrent temper outbursts along with a persistent irritable or angry mood. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. Form of depression caused by deprivation of sunlight. Seasonal affective disorder. Bouts of severe depression and manic episodes. Bipolar disorder. Heightened mood characterized by risky behaviors, fast talking, flights of ideas. Mania. Lower levels of serotonin and norepinephrine linked to depression, higher levels of norepinephrine linked to mania, runs in families suggesting genes. Biological causes of depressive and bipolar disorders. Negative thought patterns leads to depression. Cognitive causes of depressive and bipolar disorders. Not multiple personalities, have one personality. Schizophrenia. Hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking, disorganized speech. Positive symptoms of schizophrenia. False sensory experiences, such as seeing something in the absence of an external visual stimulus. Hallucinations. False beliefs, often of persecution or grandeur, that may accompany psychotic disorders. Delusions. Flight effect, impaired decision-making, inability to pay attention, catatonia. Negative symptoms of schizophrenia. A lack of emotional responsiveness. Flight effect. Being frozen over periods of time. Catatonia. Biological abnormalities, genetics, dopamine hypothesis, diathesis stress. Causes of schizophrenia. Enlarged ventricles, smaller frontal cortex. Brain abnormalities involved with schizophrenia. Runs in family, MZ twins at higher risk. Genetics involved with schizophrenia. Too much dopamine in the brain. Dopamine hypothesis involved with schizophrenia. Individual has a genetic predisposition, disease must be turned on by environmental stimuli. Diathesis stress involved with schizophrenia. Marked by extreme, inflexible personality traits that cause subjective distress or impaired social and occupational functioning. Personality disorders. Not avoidant of socialization, more like anti-society, disregard for others, manipulative, breaks laws. Antisocial personality disorder. Condition marked by extreme instability in mood, identity, and impulse control. Borderline personality disorder. Excessive emotionality and attention-seeking. Histrionic personality disorder. Need for admiration and lack of empathy. Narcissistic personality disorder. Our behavior springs from unconscious drives and conflicts. Psychodynamic approach. Carl Rogers, techniques include active listening, accepting environment, focuses on patient growth. Humanistic approach, client-centered therapy. Ellis, techniques include analyzing self-defeating behaviors to change through patterns and then change behaviors associated with said patterns. Cognitive approach, rational emotive therapy. Illogical thought, psychological problems and challenges those thoughts.